The walk to her first class was a fight against the building itself. The Galactic Accord Academy didn't have normal doors or straight hallways. The walls were made of a shifting, glowing crystal that pulsed with a soft light. Pathways opened and closed based on some logic Gina didn't understand. For the other students, it seemed easy. They flowed through the corridors like fish in water. For Gina, a human from a planet everyone considered a backwater, it was a maze. She had been given a data slate with a map, but the symbols kept changing. The soft, chiming voice of the Academy's computer had told her, "Proceed to Hall of Resonant Knowledge, Sector Gamma." That was 20 minutes ago. Now she was hopelessly lost, and very, very late. Her heart beat a fast, nervous rhythm in her chest. This was not the first impression she wanted to make. The Galactic Accord Academy was the most famous school in the known universe. Only the best and brightest from hundreds of worlds were invited. Humanity had only received its invitation a single cycle ago. Gina was one of the first 10 humans to ever walk these halls. She felt the weight of her entire species on her shoulders. Finally, she saw a doorway that matched the symbol on her slate. It was a tall arch of swirling blue and silver light. Taking a deep breath to calm herself, she stepped through. The classroom was huge. It was like a giant bowl, with rows of seats curving down towards a central stage. The air smelled strange. A mix of ozone, something like wet soil, and a sweet, flowery scent she couldn't name. The light was dim, but the central stage was bright, lit by a holographic projection of a twisting purple plant. Every single student in the room turned to look at her. There were dozens of them, and no two looked the same. A large, reptilian student with scales the color of dried blood and thick horns on his head let out a low grunt. His eyes, like yellow slits, narrowed at her. Beside him, a being that seemed to be made of light and shimmering cloth shifted, its form rippling with what felt like annoyance. Another student, who looked like a walking, intelligent plant with vines for hair and bark like skin, tilted its head. Gina saw multiple sets of compound eyes, single glowing orbs, and sensory pits all focused directly on her. The teacher, who was standing on the central stage, stopped talking. He was tall and thin, with long, jointed legs and arms that ended in 3 delicate fingers. His face was avian, with a sharp beak and large, black eyes that held a deep intelligence. This was Instructor Kale, a renowned xenobiologist from the avian star system. The silence was heavy and uncomfortable. Gina's face felt warm. She bowed formally, the way she had been taught for first greetings. "My apologies, Instructor," she said, her voice sounding too small in the vast room. The transit schedule from Earth was imprecise. It was a polite lie. The truth was, the human dormitory was in the oldest, most distant part of the station, far from the important halls like this one. It was a quiet message about where the Academy thought humanity belonged. Instructor Kale's beak clicked softly. "I see. The integration of new member species always presents logistical challenges." His tone was not unkind, but it was dismissive. "Please find a seat, Cadet." "Gina," she supplied. "Cadet Gina." A few soft, chittering sounds came from the back of the room. Laughter. Her human name was simple and plain to their ears. She looked for an empty seat. Her eyes scanned the curved rows. Most seats were filled. Her gaze landed on the only open spot, next to a student who looked more solid than the others. He had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head with dark hair and calm, brown eyes. He wasn't human. His skin had a slight coppery sheen and his ears were pointed, but his body plan was familiar. He was a Koryo, a species known for their incredible logic and skill with technology. He met her gaze and gave a very small, almost imperceptible nod towards the empty seat next to him. Gina moved quickly, walking down the steps. The path felt like a mile long. She was aware of every alien eye following her. She slid into the seat, placing her simple canvas bag on the floor. The Koryo boy gave her another slight nod but did not speak. Instructor Kale resumed his lecture. The hologram on the stage zoomed in on the purple plant. "As I was saying, the Vex plant of Xylos 5 represents a classic example of hyperaggressive floral adaptation. Note the barbed thorns that can inject a potent neurotoxin. Its growth rate is exponential, capable of overrunning a standard landing zone in less than 3 cycles." The lecture was cold and clinical. The instructor talked about the plant's weaknesses, its cellular structure, and the most effective ways to neutralize it. The large reptilian student, whose name she learned was Boral, raised a heavy hand. "The Tarkellan solution is the most efficient," Boral said, his voice a low rumble. "Controlled plasma burns. It cleanses the area completely and leaves no residue for regrowth." The plant-like student, Leora, spoke next, her voice a soft rustle. "A targeted chemical agent is more precise. It breaks down the plant's cellular walls without harming the surrounding ecosystem. My people, the Phyton, prefer a method that respects the balance of life, even when removing a threat." Gina listened, but she felt a growing unease. They were only talking about the plant as a problem, a thing to be destroyed, managed, or erased. They described its toxins as weapons, its growth as an invasion. No one was asking why. She looked at the hologram. She saw the thorns, but she also saw the subtle patterns on the leaves. She saw the way the plant twisted, and it reminded her of videos she had seen of climbing vines on Earth, seeking sunlight. It wasn't just mindless aggression. It was a will to live. Her seatmate, the choreo boy, noticed her intense stare. He leaned over slightly. "The data is fascinating, is it not?" he whispered. "Its biological efficiency is unparalleled in this quadrant." Gina looked away from the hologram and met his eyes. He seemed sincere, not mocking. He was stating a fact. She shook her head just a little. "You are only seeing the threat," she whispered back. "You are not listening to it." He blinked, his logical mind clearly puzzled by her statement. Listening? It is a plant. It does not possess a language. Before Gina could answer, Instructor Kale's voice cut through the air. His sharp black eyes were fixed on them. "A private discussion, cadets?" he asked. The whole class looked their way again. The choreo boy immediately straightened up, his face becoming a neutral mask. Instructor Kale's gaze shifted to Gina. "You have been a quiet addition to our class, Cadet Gina, and your people are new to the galactic community. Perhaps you have an alternative analysis to contribute." He gestured to the hologram. "Perhaps a human method of dealing with such a nuisance." The way he said human was polite, but it carried the same tone someone might use to describe an old simple tool. The class waited. Boral the Tarkellan folded his thick arms, a smirk on his reptilian face. They were all expecting something primitive. Maybe she would suggest hitting it with a rock, or, at best, setting it on fire with a simple chemical explosive. This was it, her first real moment. She could shrink back, mumble an apology, and confirm their belief that humans were backwards. Instead, Gina took a slow, quiet breath. She looked at the instructor, then at the preserved sample of the real Vex plant sitting in a clear container on his desk. She stood up. Her legs felt a little weak, but her voice was steady. "May I approach the specimen?" she asked. A new silence fell over the hall. This was different from the silence when Gina had entered. That had been a silence of judgment. This was a silence of pure surprise. No one had expected her to actually go to the front of the class. They thought she would mumble something from her seat and then sink into shame. Instructor Kale's head tilted. His large, black eyes studied her. He was clearly curious. After a moment, he gave a single, sharp nod. "You may approach, Cadet Gina." The walk to the central stage felt even longer than the walk to her seat. The eyes of the entire class were glued to her. She could feel their confusion and their growing interest. What could this human possibly do? She carried no tools. She had no advanced scanner. Her hands were empty. She stopped in front of the instructor's desk. The preserved Vex plant was in a clear case. It was smaller than the hologram, but just as strange. Its purple leaves were curled in on themselves, looking dry and dangerous. The thorns were sharp like needles. It looked exactly like what everyone said it was. A threat. Gina did not look at the class. She did not look at Instructor Kale. She focused only on the plant. She closed her eyes. A soft murmur went through the room. What was she doing? Was this some kind of human prayer? Boral, the large Tarkellan, let out a low, grumbling sound. He was losing patience. Gina ignored them. She was thinking about Earth. She was thinking about the ancient forests and the deep, quiet understanding that her people had spent thousands of years learning. Humanity had not had alien technology for most of its history. They only had their world. They had to learn to live with it, to listen to its secrets. She took a slow, deep breath, filling her lungs. Then, she began to hum.it was not a song with a melody anyone would know. It was a low, steady sound. Came from deep in her chest. The vibrations were soft at first, then they grew stronger. The sound was a series of tones that seemed to move through the air in a way that normal sound did not. It was a little rough, a little wild. It was the sound of wind through deep canyons and the rumble of earth. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The confusion in the room grew. A few students exchanged looks. Was this a joke? Was the human cadet malfunctioning? Then, the Vex plant move.it was a tiny movement at first. A single, curled leaf at the tip of one vine twitched. Then, slowly, as Gina held a long, resonant note, the vine began to uncurl. It was not the fast, aggressive movement from the holographic simulations. This was slow. It was careful. The vine lifted into the air, swaying gently from side to side. The sharp thorns seemed to soften, not disappearing, but looking less like weapons and more like simple parts of the plant. Gina changed her tone. The hum shifted, becoming slightly higher, a little softer. It was a questioning sound. The vine responded. It stopped its side-to-side sway and began to move in a small, slow circle, as if tracing a pattern in the air. The entire classroom was frozen. No one made a sound. No one breathed. Boral's mouth was slightly open, his earlier smirk completely gone. Leora, the plant-like phyton, had leaned so far forward she was almost out of her seat. Her vine-like hair was trembling. The student made of light had dimmed, as if in respect. Minsu, the choreo boy Gina had sat next to, watched with wide eyes. His logical mind was trying to process the data. There was no energy signature, no chemical release, just sound, vibration. It defied every standard model of xenobotanical interaction. Gina opened her eyes. She looked at the plant, which was now holding its vine in a graceful arc. She stopped humming. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the deepest silence Gina had ever heard. The plant slowly settled back into its container, but it did not return to its tightly curled, defensive state. It remained more open, more relaxed. Gina turned to face the class. Their faces were a picture of shock and awe. She saw not a single trace of the earlier scorn or pity. Instructor Kale was the first to find his voice. It was hushed, filled with a reverence that had not been there before. "Cadet Gina," he said. What was that?" Gina looked out at the silent, staring faces. She knew this was her one chance to explain, not just for herself, but for all of humanity. "On Earth," she began, her voice clear and steady in the quiet room. "We learned that life is not just a set of problems to be solved. It is a conversation." She gestured towards the Vex plant. "You see a nuisance, a thing to be burned or poisoned. You see its toxin as a weapon. But what if it is not a weapon? What if it is a language?" She looked at Leora. "You said your people respect the balance of life. My people try to understand the song of life. Every living thing has a frequency, a resonance. The Vex plant isn't just aggressive. It is defending its territory. It is responding to frequencies we cannot naturally hear. The toxin you catalog is its language of warning. It is saying, stay away. This is my space." She looked back at the plant. "My people were late to the stars. We had no other worlds to go to. We only had Earth. So we had to learn to listen to it. We had to learn to speak with it. We call this bioresonance. It is not about control. It is about understanding. I did not command the plant. I listened to its silent song and I sang back to it in a way it understood. I told it there was no danger." She finally looked at Instructor Kale. "You have been teaching us to read the words of life, but you never taught us to listen to the music." The instructor was speechless. He looked from Gina to the now calm plant and back again. He had spent his entire life studying alien biology, but he had always been an outsider looking in, taking notes. This girl, this human from a primitive world, had just shown him that you could be invited in. The class remained silent, but the quality of the silence had changed once more. It was no longer the silence of shock. It was the silence of a door being opened, revealing a room they never knew existed. Boral slowly unfolded his arms. He looked at the small human girl with a new, grudging respect. He had always believed that power was in strength and fire. She had just shown him a different kind of power, one he did not understand, but could not deny. Minsu watched Gina as she stood before them all, no longer a late and clumsy student, but a teacher in her own right. He had been wrong. The plant did have a language, and this human girl was the only one in the room who was fluent. The silence in the hall was thick and heavy. It was broken by the soft, chime-like sound of the Academy's chronometer marking the end of the class period. The sound seemed to wake everyone from a deep trance. No one moved to leave. Instructor Kale slowly walked towards Gina. He stopped a few feet away, his tall, avian frame looking less like that of a distant teacher and more like that of a curious student. "A conversation," he repeated, his voice soft. "You speak of life as a conversation." He looked at the Vex plant, which was still resting in its open, calm state. "For my entire career, I have taught that the foundation of xenobiology is observation and categorization. We observe a species, we catalog its traits, its dangers, its uses. We break it down into data." He looked back at Gina, his black eyes wide. "You are suggesting we have been missing the most important part, the context." Gina nodded. She felt a little dizzy from the adrenaline. "Yes, instructor. The data tells you what a thing is, but it doesn't tell you who it is. On Earth, we have plants that only bloom when sung to. We have fungi that connect entire forests underground, sharing warnings and nutrients. We call it the Wood Wide Web. We learned that to survive, we had to become part of that network, not just observers of it." From her seat, Leora, the phyton, stood up. Her bark-like skin seemed to shimmer with emotion. "The vibration, the resonance you created, felt familiar. It felt like the old songs of my home world's deep forests. Songs my people have forgotten." She took a step forward. Can all humans do this? Gina shook her head. No. Not all. It is a skill like mathematics or engineering. It must be studied and practiced. It is called sympathetic resonance. You must learn to feel the life frequency of another being and match your own to it in a peaceful way. It requires great patience and quietness of mind. Boral the Tarkellan stood up. His large form cast a shadow. The class tensed, expecting a challenge. He walked down the steps until he was on the main floor with Gina and the instructor. He did not look angry anymore. He looked confused, and his confusion made him look young. My people, he began, his voice a low rumble, have cleared worlds of the Vex plant for cycles. We use plasma. It is efficient. It is clean. We were taught it was the best way. He looked at the harmless-looking plant. Are you saying we were talking to it the wrong way? And it was fighting back because we were shouting at it? Gina looked at the large reptilian student. She saw no malice in him, only a rigid belief in what he had been taught. In a way, yes, she said gently. If a giant, loud creature came to your home and started burning everything, you would fight back with everything you had. That is what the plant was doing. It was fighting for its life. Your plasma burns were a declaration of war. My hum was a greeting. Boral stared at the plant for a long time. Then he gave a slow, deep nod. It was a gesture of respect, not to Gina, but to the plant itself. The student made of light, who had been so quiet, now floated forward. Its voice was like a soft chord of music. This bioresonance, is it only for plants? Gina considered the question. The principle is the same for all life, but it is much more difficult with animals, and impossible for us with intelligent beings like yourselves. The frequencies are too complex, the minds too independent. It is best for the simpler, foundational life. The life that builds the ecosystem. Instructor Kale finally found his voice again. He looked at the class, his expression serious. This changes things. This is not a minor discovery. This is a new field of study. He looked at Gina. Cadet Gina, the lesson you have given today is more valuable than any I had planned. You have shown us that our science, for all its advances, has been blind in one eye. He addressed the whole class. Class is dismissed, but I want you all to think about this. Think about what it means to truly listen. We will continue this discussion tomorrow. This time, the students began to move but slowly. They gathered their things, their eyes still glued to Gina. They didn't rush out. They moved past her with a new kind of caution. Not the kind you use for something dangerous, but the kind you use for something precious. As the hall began to empty, Minsu approached Gina. He had a data slate in his hand. That was illogical, he said. Then he quickly added, but it was true. The data does not lie. The plant responded. Therefore, your method is valid. He seemed to be struggling to fit what he had seen into his logical framework. I would be interested in learning more about the physics behind this bioresonance. The transfer of energy, the specific frequencies. Gina gave him a small smile. I would be happy to talk about it. Soon, only Gina and Instructor Kale were left in the Great Hall. The instructor was looking at the Vex plant, a deep thought on his face. You are the first, he said softly. The first human to come here. They sent us a diplomat, an engineer, a soldier. But they sent us a listener. He looked at her. Your lateness today, Cadet Gina. It is no longer a mark of failure. Feels like a symbol. You arrived precisely when you were meant to teach us the lesson we did not know we needed to learn. Gina bowed her head. Thank you, instructor. Do not thank me, he said. You have given me more questions than answers. And for a scientist, that is the greatest gift. He gestured for her to leave. Go. Rest. Tomorrow, the real work begins. Gina walked out of the Hall of Resonant Knowledge. The glowing crystal corridors did not feel so alien anymore. They felt interesting. She walked back towards the human dormitory. But this time, she did not feel lost. She felt like she had just found a new path. Not just for herself, but for everyone. She had entered the class as a latecomer, an outsider. She had left as a pioneer. And the entire class had been quieted not by her words, but by her willingness to listen to a song they had never even known was playing. The news of what happened in the Hall of Resonant Knowledge did not take long to spread. It moved through the academy not like a shout, but like a whisper, passed between students in dining halls and across state networks. The human, Gina, was the main subject of every conversation. The next morning, as Gina walked to her interspecies ethics class, the experience was completely different. The other students did not ignore her or look at her with pity. Now, they looked at her with open curiosity. Some looked away quickly when she met their eyes, as if embarrassed by their earlier behavior. Others gave her small, hesitant nods when she entered the new classroom, a smaller, round room. The conversation inside died down for a moment. All eyes turned to her again, but the feeling was not the same. It was not scornful. It was heavy with expectation. They were waiting to see what she would do next. She found a seat near the back. A moment later, Min-soo, the choreo boy, came and sat beside her. He gave her a formal nod. I have done some preliminary research on vibrational communication in non-sentient flora, he said, getting straight to the point. The galactic database has very little. It seems this is a largely unexplored field. Before Gina could answer, Boral, the large Tarkellan, walked in. He scanned the room, his yellow eyes finding Gina. He hesitated for a second, then walked directly towards her. He stopped in front of her desk, his bulk blocking the light. Human Gina, he said, his voice a low rumble. He seemed to be struggling for words. I have considered your words. About the Vex plant. He shifted his weight. On my homeworld, we have a creature. A stone skin. It is a pest. It eats our food stores. We use sonic blasters to drive them away. They always come back angrier. He looked at her, his expression serious. Are we shouting at them too? Gina looked up at him. She was not afraid. She could see he was genuinely asking. It is possible, she said. Sonic blasters would be very painful for them. It would be like someone screaming in your ear constantly. You would fight back or try to escape. Boral was silent for a long moment, processing this. I will send a message to my clan, he said finally. I will tell them to try a different frequency. It was a huge admission for a Tarkellan warrior. He did not say thank you, but the intent was there. He gave another slow nod and went to find a seat. Leora, the phaeton, was next. She moved gracefully to Gina's other side. Her scent was of rain and fresh soil. The memory you awoke in me, she said, her voice a soft rustle. It is a song my grandmother would sing to the great trees when I was a sapling. I had forgotten it. Last night I tried to remember. I could feel the trees in the biodome. Listening. She placed a delicate, leaf-like hand on Gina's arm. Thank you for reminding my people of a part of ourselves we had lost. Gina felt a warmth spread through her. This was more than she had ever hoped for. She wasn't just representing humanity. She was helping these other species remember things about their own worlds. The ethics instructor, a serene being from a water world, began the lesson. The topic was the rights of non-sentient species in a galactic society. The discussion was intelligent and thoughtful. Students debated the moral value of animal-level life forms and the ethics of terraforming. But now, Gina found herself included. The instructor would occasionally look her way. Cadet Gina, does the human practice of bioresonance imply a certain level of rights for such life? If you can communicate with it, does it deserve a voice? Gina thought carefully before answering. It is not about giving it a vote, she said. It is about giving it respect. It is about understanding that it has a place in the universe, and that our needs do not automatically cancel out its right to exist. We ask instead of just taking. The class listened. They didn't always agree, but they listened. Her perspective was no longer dismissed as primitive. It was seen as a different and suddenly very valuable point of view. After class, a small group of students gathered around her as she walked to her next lecture. They were from different worlds, all asking questions. Can you use this on the fungi of Zeta Reticuli? Does it work on silicon-based life? Could this help with the agricultural problems on my colony world? Gina did her best to answer, explaining the limits of her knowledge. She was not a master, only a student herself. But her humility only made them more interested. Min-soo walked beside her, quietly recording the questions on his data slate. Already starting a research project at the midday meal, she did not eat alone. She sat at a large table with Min-soo, Leora, and even Boral, who was carefully eating a slab of protein with his sharp teeth. They were an unlikely group, but they were united by a shared curiosity. Boral looked at Gina's plate of simple vegetables and grains. That is your food? He grunted. Yes, Gina said. It does not look like much, he said. Not everything needs to be big and loud to be powerful. Leora said softly, her vine hair swaying. Boral considered this, then gave a grunt that might have been a laugh. He went back to his meal. Gina looked around the bustling dining hall. She saw the hundreds of different species, all so advanced, so knowledgeable. Just yesterday, she had felt small and insignificant among them. Today, she still felt small, but she no longer felt insignificant. She had brought something to this galaxy that it didn't have before. She had brought a new way of listening. And as she sat there with her new, strange group of friends, she realized that her first day of being an outsider was over. She was now a part of the academy, and she had a song to teach them all. The following week was a whirlwind for Gina. Her life settled into a new rhythm, one where she was no longer invisible. Instructor Kale had arranged for her to have special sessions in the biodome, a massive, climate-controlled garden that held plant species from across the galaxy. He did not make her a teacher, but a researcher. Her project was to document the resonant frequencies of the dome's non-sentient flora. Minsu was almost always by her side, his data slate constantly active. He measured the air density, the humidity, the exact frequency of Gina's hums. He was trying to build a scientific model for what she could do naturally. It is not magic, he would say, more to himself than to her. It is physics, a transfer of kinetic energy at a precise harmonic interval. The plant's cellular structure must have a natural resonant frequency that, when matched, induces a state of placidity. Gina would just smile and turn to the next plant. It was a thorny, blue shrub from a high-gravity world. She closed her eyes, listening for its song. It was a quiet, high-pitched vibration, like the ringing of a tiny glass bell. She matched it with a soft, breathy whistle. The plant's sharp thorns retracted slightly, and its leaves unfolded to reveal a beautiful, silver flower. Fascinating, Minsu whispered, his fingers flying over his slate. The defensive mechanisms disengage when a non-threatening resonance is detected. It is a built-in communication system. Leora spent hours with them in the biodome. She did not have Gina's skill, but she was relearning her own people's connection to plant life. She would place her bark-like hands on the soil and listen. Sometimes she would sing the old songs her grandmother had taught her. The plants near her would often lean towards her, as if drawn by her voice. Boral did not join them in the dome. Plants were not his interest, but he sought Gina out one afternoon after her engineering class. He looked uncomfortable. "The Stoneskins," he said, getting straight to the point. "My clan tried a new frequency, a lower one, calmer one. They did not use the sonic blasters. They used a device that made a deep, humming sound." Gina waited, and Boral looked down at his large, clawed feet. The Stoneskins, they did not attack. They moved away, slowly. They went back to their caves in the mountains. They did not lose a single warrior. He looked up at her, his yellow eyes intense. "For my people, that is a greater victory than any battle. We have been fighting the Stoneskins for generations. We thought they were just stupid, angry beasts. You showed us they were listening." He didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked away. But the message was clear. Gina's simple idea was already changing things far beyond the academy walls. Not everyone was happy, however. Some of the more traditionally minded students, especially those from species that prized pure technological dominance, were skeptical. They called bioresonance a parlor trick or emotional nonsense. They argued that a plasma torch was still faster and more reliable than a hum. Gina heard the whispers, but she didn't let them bother her. She knew what she could do was real. The plants were proof point. One day, Instructor Kale came to the biodome. He watched Gina work with a delicate, floating spore plant from a gas giant. She used a series of clicks and pops to get it to change its direction of drift. When she was done, he approached. "The academic board has taken an interest in your work, Cadet Gina," he said. "They are intrigued and cautious. What you are doing challenges centuries of established xenobiological practice." Gina felt a knot of worry in her stomach. "Are they going to stop me?" Instructor Kale shook his head. "No, quite the opposite. They have approved a new, cross-disciplinary course. Introduction to Biosympathetic Communication. It will be a pilot program, and they have asked me to ask you if you would be willing to assist in teaching it." Gina was speechless. She, a first-year student, helping to teach a course. Minsu looked up from his data slate, his logical mind seeing the opportunity immediately. It would provide a structured environment to collect significant data, and it would legitimize the field. Leora clasped her hands together. "You must do it, Gina. Think of what we could learn." Gina thought about the first day, when she had felt so small and alone. She thought about the scornful looks. Now they were asking her to share her knowledge, to teach others how to listen. "I will do it," she said, her voice firm. Instructor Kale gave a rare, sharp-toothed smile. "Excellent. The class will be small at first. Volunteers. We start next week." He looked around the lush, vibrant biodome. "It seems the academy is finally ready to learn a new song. And you, Cadet Gina, will be our first conductor." That evening, Gina sat in her small room in the human dormitory. She looked out the viewport at the swirling colors of the nebula outside. She thought about Earth, about the ancient forests and the quiet wisdom of her teachers. They had sent her out into the stars, hoping she would learn. They probably never imagined she would be the one doing the teaching. She had entered the academy late, an outsider from a planet everyone had dismissed. But her first move, a simple hum to a lonely plant, had not just quieted a single class. It had started a quiet revolution. And as she looked at the stars, she hummed a soft, old Earth tune, a song of growth and understanding, wondering what other songs the universe was waiting to sing. The news of the new course spread through the academy like a soft breeze. Introduction to Biosympathetic Communication. To many, the name was strange and new. For Gina, It felt like a dream she had not dared to have. The class was not held in a large, intimidating hall. Instead, it was in the biodome itself, among the subjects they would study. On the first day, Gina arrived early. She was nervous. She was not the official teacher, Instructor Kale was, but she was the assistant, the expert. The students would be looking to her. The small group of volunteers began to arrive. Minsu was there, of course, his data slate ready. Leora came, her presence bringing a sense of calm. To Gina's surprise, Boral was there too. He stood at the back, his arms crossed, looking like he was attending a military briefing. There were others. The being of light, whose name was Alara, floated gently near a cluster of glowing mushrooms. A student from an aquatic species, whose name was Tay, sat by a small pond, the water in his portable tank sloshing softly. There were 10 students in total. A small start, but it was a beginning. Instructor Kale began. For centuries, he said, our approach to unknown life has been one of analysis and, if necessary, domination. We have been brilliant surgeons, cutting into the body of the universe to see how it works. But we forgot that the body has a spirit, a song. Cadet Gina has reminded us to listen for that song. This class is not about replacing our old knowledge. It is about adding a new sense to it. He then nodded to Gina. It was her turn. She stepped forward. She felt all their eyes on her. These were not hostile eyes anymore. They were curious, eager, and a little unsure. We will start with something simple, Gina said, her voice a little shaky. She led them to a patch of soft, green moss from a world called Viridia. This is lull moss. It is not dangerous. It is very simple. The song is very quiet. The first step is not to make a sound. The first step is to be silent. She had them all sit around the patch of moss. Close your eyes, she instructed. Just listen, not with your ears. Feel the air. Feel the life around you. Try to quiet your own thoughts. The group was silent. For a long time, the only sound was the gentle hum of the biodome's life support systems. Boral shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the inactivity. Minsu's fingers twitched, as if missing his data slate. Don't try to force it, Gina whispered. Just be present. Imagine you are meeting a shy creature. You wouldn't run up and shout at it. You would sit quietly and wait. More time passed. Then, Leora let out a soft sigh. I feel it, she whispered. A very soft vibration, like a purr. Gina smiled. Yes, that is it. That is the Lulmoss's song. It is a song of contentment. One by one, the others began to sense it too. Alara's light pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm. Tay closed his eyes and a look of peace came over his face. Even Boral eventually stopped fidgeting. His rough features softened. This is not what I expected, Minsu said quietly, his eyes still closed. The data is experiential. It is subjective, but it is consistent. For the rest of the session, Gina did not have them hum or sing. She only had them listen. She taught them how to breathe slowly, to calm their own heartbeats, to become a peaceful part of the environment instead of an intruder. When the class ended, the students left slowly, quietly. They seemed thoughtful. Boral walked up to Gina. Silence is difficult, he admitted. My people value action, but I understand now. The silence is the first action. It is the action of respect. He gave his now familiar nod and left. In the following weeks, the class grew. Other students, hearing whispers from their friends, asked to join. The small group of 10 became 15, then 20. Instructor Kale had to limit the size to keep the sessions manageable. Gina taught them the basics. She showed them how to find the simple, steady song of the lulmoss. She taught them how to hum a greeting to the gentle, sun-seeking vines. It was slow, patient work. Many of them struggled. Their minds were too busy, too filled with equations and logic to be truly quiet. But some, like Leora, took to it naturally. Others, like Minsu, learned to appreciate it as a new form of data collection. And Boral, to everyone's surprise, developed a deep, resonant hum that seemed to calm the most stubborn of plants. He found a new kind of strength, one that was not about breaking, but about connecting. One day, near the end of the cycle, the entire academy was invited to a presentation in the biodome. Gina and her class were going to demonstrate what they had learned. The dome was full. Students and teachers from every species stood among the alien plants, their chatter filling the air. Gina felt a nervous flutter in her chest. This was bigger than her first day. Instructor Kale quieted the crowd. You have all heard the rumors, he said. You have heard of a human magic. Today you will not see magic. You will see a new science. You will see understanding. Gina stepped forward. She did not do the demonstration alone. She stood with her class. Minsu, Leora, Boral, Alara, Tay, and all the others stood in a semicircle behind her. They were a united front. They did not perform tricks. They simply communed with the biodome. As one, they began to hum, each finding the frequency of a different plant. It was not a song in unison. It was a symphony of different tones, a harmony of life. The plants responded. Vines swayed, flowers bloomed, leaves turned towards the sound. The entire dome seemed to come alive in a new way, pulsing with a peaceful, shared energy. The watching crowd was utterly silent, captivated. They saw not one human, but many different species working together, speaking a new, universal language. They saw the Tarkellan warrior humming gently to a flower. They saw the logical choreo boy feeling the vibration of a tree. They saw the phaeton singing an ancient song. When they finished, the silence held for a moment, and then the dome erupted into a soft, respectful wave of sound. Clapping, chiming, rustling. The many ways the galaxy showed appreciation. Gina looked at her classmates, her friends. They had done it together. She had entered the academy late, a lone human girl. But her first move had started something. It had not just quieted a class. It had started a new conversation, one that would now continue without her having to speak at all. She had given them the first note, and now the entire academy was learning the song.